Hi, good morning. Thank you so much for joining us. You have tuned in to New Mexico Economic Development Department's webinar series that we are hosting every week where we address topics about COVID-19 response. And today we are discussing economic recovery for child care facilities. Before we begin, I wanted to go over a few points. We are recording this presentation, so this will be available on our YouTube channel, and I will post our YouTube channel link in the chat box, and we will also send out a PDF of the presentation to all the folks that registered. We did get your questions when you registered, and we will do our best to answer those at the end of the presentation. And if you do have questions that come up during the presentation, please put those in the questions box and we will as well do our best to answer those. And without further ado, I want to introduce the Cabinet Secretary for the Economic Development Department, Alicia Keys.
Thank you, Joanna. Thanks everyone for being here this morning. The Economic Development Department is pleased today to be collaborating with Secretary Graginski and the Early Childhood Education and Care Department to explain a little bit more about some important assistance programs for child care providers. We know that our governor, Michelle Lujan Grisham, is laying the groundwork for recovery and working with business leaders to reopen the economy with COVID-safe practices. These are health precautions that will protect employees and the public and lead to a recovery that is sustainable. We know the importance of child care providers in this plan to reopen. We know employees with young children will not return to work unless there is safe child care. I have a lot of mamas on my staff, and it's something that's super important to us. There are so many challenges in maintaining safe operations during and after the health emergency. So that's why Secretary Graginski and her team have worked hard to support the needs of child care facilities and create these assistance programs. So we're super excited to be working with her team and moving forward on this. I know I already gave a presentation to some of the providers in an early childhood group, but for those of you not on the call, I'm going to do a really quick overview of the programs available from Economic Development, and then we're going to turn it over to Secretary Graginski. So let's see. This slide that is up right now shows our business loan guarantee program, and this is where our agency acts as your guarantor. And then the second program is a LEADA 0% interest loan program. This is a little bit more restrictive because statutorily we're mostly working with manufacturers, so I don't think this is going to be your program. I do want to point out also that there's the New Mexico Recovery Fund, which is being administered through the SIC and Sun Mountain Capital. Our next webinar is coming up on May 14th. If you look to the right of your screen, that is alternatives to traditional building and customer relationships, and this is given by our Main Street team. So please join that. If you want to go ahead, and there we go. Also, the New Mexico Finance Authority has an emergency loan to healthcare and critical service providers. This is something to look into, and the website is at the top of the page. Go ahead, Joanna. And this is our Buy for Tomorrow Today website, buynmlocal.com. This is where companies can put their website online, and people who are sitting at home that want to buy local or help out child care providers locally can buy vouchers, can buy products from you. So we have, actually this slide is a little old. We have over 800 businesses statewide that are participating. I'm about to sneeze, sorry. So please check that out. Let's go ahead on to the next slide. Excuse me, thank you. And this is just a reminder to please complete your 2020 census. Super important for the state of New Mexico that we are all counted. So you can do that as you are listening to us. Let's go on to the next slide, Joanna. Oh, right. And so it's fantastic when cabinet secretaries get to collaborate and help each other out. And Secretary Gerginski has been aggressive about working with the Economic Development Department and seeing what we can do for you all. So I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Secretary Gerginski. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Keys. That was wonderful, and just so wonderful to partner with you and echo what you've said about our great governor and her commitment to both New Mexico's physical health and safety as well as their economic health. And also want to give a big shout out to your regional leads who've been working closely with some of our regional hub staff and trying to continue to connect our child care programs across the state with all the amazing resources your department has to offer. So thank you all for joining us today, and it is a pleasure to be coordinating and collaborating with the New Mexico Economic Development Department to share with you details about the Child Care Stabilization and Recovery Grant that we will be issuing as a result of our CARES funding that we received from the federal government. You go to the next slide. I think what's really become truly clear to what many of us knew, but to more and more people, is the essential work of early education and care across this country, and particularly here in New Mexico. Early care and education really does these 4 key things and much more, but every day you are all providing care, education, and interventions which are supporting the health and development of families and young children. You're ensuring safe, healthy environments which are supporting the appropriate, healthy, and nurturing experiences that we know prepare children for success in school and beyond. You're allowing parents to go to work or pursue an education, and you're employing and supporting the development of a strong early childhood workforce. So those are a lot of really essential and critical functions that give us a strong economy, give us a strong educational foundation for children and families, and set our state up for success. Next slide. So as we talked about, I believe it was just last week, part of the CARES Act funding that we discussed last week was for our bonus wage incentive program. And so I just want to recap for everybody. This funding is part of a $3.5 billion that has come to states through the Child Care and Development Block Grant for immediate assistance to child care providers. New Mexico received approximately $29.4 million, and the CARES Act funding is focused on these 2 really critical issues: preventing our child care providers from going out of business and supporting child care for families, including those for healthcare workers, first responders, and others that are playing a critical role during this public health emergency. So as many of you know on the call, ever since the public health emergency was announced on March 11th, the Early Childhood Care and Education Department has been working very collaboratively with other cabinet secretaries, with our provider community, with our advocacy community, to really think about what it is that our early childhood care and education providers need. So we were able to issue a $250 differential for child care assistance contracts immediately starting for March and April. We were able to provide child care for healthcare professionals, first responders, and other essential employees, again, right away in March when we knew many of them needed to continue to prevent the spread of COVID. Many may not have had access to child care or other supports because of all the various changes that came to all of our lives. And so we were able to implement that immediately. As I said, just last week, we were able to issue the wage incentive, which will reach nearly 4,000 early childhood professionals across the state. And then this week, we're going to talk about the Child Care Stabilization and Recovery Grant, which will support all of our 998 licensed facilities across the state. We also took swift action to ensure that all of those facilities that remained open and did not temporarily close during the public health emergency had access to personal protective equipment, We ordered thermometers, which just came in late yesterday, and so our Deputy Secretary Salih can share some of that. All of these different initiatives, we are using the CARES funding to help support. We know, I just want to say at the outset, which I said last week, the initial ask from Congress for the Child Care Development Block Grant stimulus was $50 billion. So we were able, the country was able to get 3.5 billion. So as we look at the options and the choices that as a department we had to make, we know that the funds that are available are not all that we need, but we are very grateful to the federal government and to the governor and her leadership and her team for helping make these dollars available and available quickly to get to all of you across the state of New Mexico. Next slide. In addition to the funding that we received from CARES, we have also used our existing funding that we have within the Early Childhood Education and Care Department to waive parent co-payments, to pay child care contracts based on enrollment, not attendance. And the governor, and I think she may be the only governor in the country that has said, if we have any child care employees who test positive for COVID-19, and for some reason they are not eligible or do not have access to other insurance coverage, the state of New Mexico through our department will help ensure that they have the treatment they need for COVID-19. We also have worked to develop enhanced health and safety guidance with our Department of Health and with other national colleagues across the country. And again, distributing personal protective equipment to providers across the state. So in addition to the funding and the work that we've done with the CARES, we have also used our resources, our networks, our collaborating partners, both at the cabinet level and also in our community partners, to help our early childhood education and care providers through this public health emergency. The next slide gives you, I think is the graph that shows you this is the 29.4 million. And just to give you a sense, the majority of this funding is going directly into the hands of our early childhood, our child care operators, the professionals who work in those facilities. And up until now, the majority of the funding has gone only to those providers that have served the child care assistance contract, so which we are very grateful to, and it's a very important part of our role as the lead agency for the Child Care and Development Block Grant. But we know that many of our child care providers across the state also need assistance because we want to have a strong child care industry as we come back to recovery, because as Secretary Keyes said, businesses start opening, families need access to care. Child care is a key economic driver in the success of our state. Next slide. So I'm going to turn it over to Claire to walk through some of this, but again, I just wanted to, as you go through this, you're going to get a lot of different information, and we are working very quickly and diligently to get the application up and out and very easy for you to apply online. So we are still working through some of those things, but we wanted you to know about this important grant opportunity so you can start preparing the kind of information that you'll need when you do get access to the link. And again, we're so pleased to be partnering with the New Mexico Economic Development Department, because we know this is one set of resources, but the other resources that Secretary Keyes mentioned are also important, and building those relationships with the regional offices in the Economic Development Department will also be beneficial to the long-term health of your business. We are making tiered grant awards. The goal is to every licensed facility in the state. We worked behind the scenes with the numbers, and again, taking into account that some of our childcare operators didn't necessarily receive a lot, but they have received a lot more than others during this March, April, May period. And so we're taking resources and thinking about how we can strategically target them and keep a strong industry both in our licensed homes, our licensed group homes, and our centers, large and small. So you will see here that we know that the grants can cover really whatever you need as a small business. And I think the next slide, I do turn it over to you, Claire. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's great. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Good, wonderful. So nice to be here with you on this bright, sunny Tuesday morning. My name is Claire Dudley Chavez, and I'm the Director of Policy Research and Quality Initiatives for the New Mexico Early Childhood Education and Care Department. And I want to echo Secretary Groginski in thanking Secretary Keys and her staff for facilitating this webinar and for really working with us to think about how to best support the really essential and profound work of child care providers around the state. I also want to thank all of you who are taking part in the call this morning. We have almost 400 folks, and I like to think that you all are really the shining lights out and about around our state, providing really important care for children. So thank you. There will be time for questions at the end, and I will echo what Secretary Groginski said. We may not be able to get to all of your questions, but please do know that we will respond if you call, text, or email. We look forward to visiting with you about this grant opportunity, and we also thank you for the feedback that you've given to us on the wage incentive program. Thank you. So we're going to talk now about who is eligible for this child care grant opportunity. And as we've stated, all child care centers and homes that are licensed by the State of New Mexico Children, Youth, and Families Department are eligible. And we've been very clear that any provider, any licensed provider that provides a complete application will receive some funding. We really want to make sure that everybody has an opportunity to receive some level of funding. The awards will depend on the setting, the license capacity, and the percentage of child care assistance contracts as of the end of April of this year. A differential of $2,500 will be given to centers that are licensed to serve more than 8 children under the age of 2. We really do have a focus on supporting those individuals that are providing that most important care to infants and toddlers. And also a differential of $2,000 will be given to centers, and a differential of $1,500 to homes at the STAR levels of 3, 4, and 5, supporting those quality efforts around our state. You can move to the next slide, please. So the funds are available. How much is available? Secretary Groginski mentioned that we have planned for and budgeted to spend $12 million to support child care providers around the state through this grant program. We have one-time grants that are available between the amounts of $2,000 and $34,500. Next slide, please. And we've broken it out, and it seems like there are a lot of categories, but they're really important categories, and it's how we are thinking about making sure that everybody can have the opportunity to apply for and receive some funding. So we have grants for licensed homes and group homes, for private pay only, and for child care assistant contracts. And it's based on the percentage of children that you're serving through subsidy. And we can talk about this a little bit more during the question and answer, but I just wanted to be really clear that we've been thoughtful about all the different settings that provide care for children and thinking about ways to support each of those important settings. So we could go to the next slide, please.
And Claire, if I could just add one thing here too. We wanted to help make sure that these grants, that it was not complicated necessarily on your end or our end, and that we were using objective data. So as you see there, we're looking at how many licensed for the group home. Again, remembering that in March and April, differentials were provided to centers and homes, and contracts have been paid and co-payments have been waived. We know that those facilities have continued to have access to resources where other of our homes and group homes that are private pay only, if their families did not honor their contracts or could not honor their contracts, those providers may have lost significant revenue during those times. So just as you get your questions, which I know you will have many, that is our thinking, is taking limited resources, making sure that we are supporting our entire industry across the state as we work towards recovery.
Absolutely, that is great. So we also have specific categories and focus on grants for licensed centers that are private pay tuition only, and you can see those outlined on this slide. And then if we could move to the next slide, please. We have grants for licensed centers that are both private pay tuition and those that accept child care assistance contracts. And I'm sorry, we have a little bit of formatting issues, but we will fix this, and we will be happy to send out that presentation to all of you through Matt's distribution list. Thank you. Can go to the next slide, please. So here's the important question, is how to apply. There will be an online application. We will send an application link via our email blast. It will also be available on the New Mexico Kids website. We want to make sure that folks around our state, some of whom may not have access to internet, are still able to apply. So there will be paper applications available, and you can call New Mexico Kids and request an application. And we've learned from last week's announcement and release of the wage incentive program. So we are going to probably be asking some of you to be our samples and help do a test run of the application. This has been a really important learning experience for us, and we are grateful to you for your feedback and for your suggestions. If we could move to the next slide, please. So as you think about applying, we wanted you to be prepared to provide some important information that talks about the setting in which you provide care, the impact that this virus has had on your ability to manage your business and to provide this really important, significant care for children. So there are some key things that we would like you to think about as you begin to put together your application. One is, what has the impact of this public health emergency had on your enrollment? What was your enrollment at the end of last year or the start of 2020? What is your current enrollment or your enrollment at the end of April? What has the impact had on your staff? How many full-time and part-time individuals were you able to hire and have on staff at the start of this year? And how many are you currently employing? What has been the impact on your income and your ability to really run your successful business? What has the impact of the public health emergency been on your expenses? Have you had additional expenses due to cleaning or sanitation? Have you been providing additional support, especially perhaps in social emotional or other, to your staff? What have been some of the key expenses that you've been faced as part of this time in this public emergency? And then we are going to ask for a brief description of how the grant funds will be used. As Secretary Gorginski stated at the start of the presentation, there are a number of ways that these grant funds can be used, including cleaning and sanitation, additional supports for staff. So please just think about how you plan to use the funds. So if we could go to the next slide, please. And we also are going to ask you some information about your business. So please be prepared to submit the following around your business or organization's income. We're going to be asking you about the total income from calendar year 2019, what your income was in the start of this year in January 2020, and what it is or what it was at the end of April in 2020. We're going to be asking you to describe your organization expenses and any change in expenses that you've experienced. Again, starting from what was the end of year, calendar year 2019 organizational expenses, what were your expenses at the start of the new year 2020, and what were they at the conclusion of April. And then you will also be asked to provide a State of New Mexico W-9 form, excuse me. If we could go to the next slide, please. The other thing that is a really important component of this application is the impact that this has had on your staff and also on the children that you serve. So we are going to be asking you to provide information about the number of full-time and part-time staff that you had prior to the start of the public emergency, and where you are currently in terms of the number of full-time and part-time staff you're employing. We're also going to be asking about your child enrollment by age at the start of this year in January 2020, and again at the conclusion of April 2020. And we have a chart that's part of the application that is really focused on enrollment and also on staffing. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And this is also a really important question, the payment process. So we will have the grant applications are due by June the 30th, 2020. And we just want to be really clear that this is not, I repeat, this is not a first come, first serve situation. We encourage you all to think carefully about this and to complete and submit an application. We really are committed to providing grant funding to all licensed providers that provide a complete application. It is not first come, first serve. The application is due. There is a due date though by June the 30th of 2020. We will announce the grant awards within 2 weeks of receipt of a complete application. And then a one-time check will be mailed to the grant recipient directly. So that's the payment process. And let's go to the next slide, please. And the important question about grant reporting for all of us who have worked on grants over the years, the big question is, what am I going to be asked to report? We're not asking for a formal grant report, but we are going to publicly identify any grant recipients, and you will be included in communication and outreach materials announcing and highlighting the Child Care Stabilization and Recovery Grant programs. We're really going to want to highlight who received these funds, what they're doing with the funds, and the impact that these funds have had on the really important work of child care professionals around New Mexico. This is something that's really a key priority of our governor, of Secretary Keyes and Secretary Gorginski, is making sure that we recognize and support the really vital work of child care professionals around New Mexico. So if we could go to the last slide, I think, or to the next slide. And here it is, the final slide of the presentation. And it includes my name and contact information, as well as Matt Bieber, who is the Director of Communications. Both Matt and I are really ready and willing to respond to your questions, to your concerns, to your ideas, to your suggestions. We've included our email addresses and our telephone numbers, so we do really encourage you to reach out to either one of us, and we are happy to respond to your questions. So I think now we'll open it up for questions. Thank you all really very much for being here this morning and for the work that you're doing. Thank you.
Okay, sorry, my computer's acting up a little bit. I have got some questions that, this is Alicia, by the way, Secretary Keyes. I have some questions that were submitted prior that I'm going to go ahead and ask the Secretary. And also Joanna will be monitoring questions just that are coming in live. Joanna, are you?
Yes, I am, Secretary.
Perfect. So just feel free to chime in. One of our first questions, let's see if I can see where it comes from. Will providers qualify for a recovery grant even if they are still closed?
Yes. The answer to that is yes. We are, again, these grants are for all licensed homes, group homes, and centers across the state of New Mexico.
Okay, fantastic. Our next question is, what if child care centers, what if our child care center is only serving essential worker families? Will we still be eligible to receive funding?
Yes. Everybody is eligible, and that's why we did a we took the amount of available funding and our universe of licensed providers and looked at all the different resources and supports we've been able to provide through this public health. And we wanted to make sure that every licensed provider across the state of New Mexico has access to funding through this grant program.
That's fantastic. Now, this is a question about when the order is lifted and we're not sure when that will be. I know the date of May 15th has been bantered about, but I do know that the governor is looking at the gating criteria in order to officially decide. But the question is, will the children be able to return, or will this also be in phases?
We will continue to use the health and safety practices, and those have been posted actually back up on the newmexicokids.org website last night. Late yesterday afternoon, we had some updates and worked with our Department of Health colleagues, but we're going to continue to just listen and watch for the governor's leadership as we slowly move to reopen and through recovery. But currently, we are following the public health order where people should, as much as possible, stay home. But we do know some businesses are opening, so our childcare providers are allowed to serve essential and non-essential, with the exception of the counties in the Northwest who still are under a different public health order. And I can get to, Matt sent out details about that last night in our email communication. So we're going to just continue to monitor the situation and keep you updated as the governor has to make some very tough decisions based on the data that she's receiving.
Great. Now, some of these questions are a little repetitive, but I do think they're worth asking just to kind of drive home certain details. Our next question is, are preschool centers whose staff have gone on unemployment still eligible for this new grant? Can it be used for rent, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. It can be used for any type of operating expenses, any expenses that you as a small business or a large business have incurred during this public health emergency. So it is not contingent on whether staff are on unemployment or not on unemployment, whether you've received different other financial assistance. It is available to everybody.
That's great. Okay, we're moving on to our next question. When will we know the amount our center will receive, and are there specific items we have to use it for?
Yes, when we release the application, we will have in there the exact amounts based on those different criteria that Claire reviewed. And again, we're using objective data that we have at the ECECD department, like your license capacity, which is something we have in our data system, the number of child care assistance contracts that you had at the end of April. That helps us determine the percent of your, so we're going to use, even though your license capacity may not be your enrolled capacity, we wanted to use metrics that were objective, that would be applied consistently across all businesses. And so we will be using that, as well as whether you're, for centers, how large you are or how small you are. So when we release the application, those dollar amounts will be in there, so you will know exactly what your facility is eligible for based on those criteria. And I forgot what the other question was there. I think it was.
Let me just scroll back up. And what specific items we have to use it for.
Exactly, and that's pretty open. That's open-ended, and I mean, I think our hope is to release the application, within the next week. I don't know, Claire, and I know we've been working with a developer of the system. We want it to be seamless for you, as seamless as possible, so that you can easily apply. We wanted to provide you some of that information that you'll need to gather in advance, so you can start preparing to submit your application when it's available.
So we're looking at next week sometime for the application process.
Claire, do you want to give me any insights on that?
Yes, we hope to be able to release it within the next week.
Okay.
Okay, great,
Thank
fantastic.
you.
So our next question is, we have 3 centers licensed for 3 different locations. So would submission be on 3 requests or limited to 1 submission?
We base this on each separate licensed facility. So it would be for 3 different facilities.
Okay,
But
great.
you'd have to submit 3 different
Separate
applications. Yeah.
3 different applications. Okay, that's great to know. Distance teachers qualify for the wage incentive. And will NMPK teachers still be included since we are still coming into the buildings every day to create videos?
So the priority for the wage incentive is to support those early care and education professionals who are providing direct care in person to children.
Okay,
So
great.
distance learning would not be eligible.
Okay, so the NMPK teachers are not eligible?
They are not.
Okay,
If they're not providing in-person
If they're not
daily
providing in-person care.
and education to the children. Right?
okay. Okay, good to know. Are temporary daycare facilities services included? And what are the requirements for the hazard pay?
So I can talk about the
Yeah, good.
requirements for the hazard pay. The wage incentive application is available on the New Mexico Kids website. It's available for licensed providers and registered providers around the state. There's 2 applications. There's one if you're an employee, and there's one if you're a director or an administrator. You are asked to provide evidence that you have been providing direct care to children. You have to provide pay stubs, a state issued W-9, and also your schedule for the last month. And we ask that you complete the application and then submit all the necessary documentation by the 15th of the month following the month that you'd like to receive the incentive for. So the incentive is available for April, May, and June of this year. So we're asking you to provide the complete application and the necessary documents for April by May the 15th. And there's lots of information about the wage incentive on the NewMexicoKids.org website.
So what was the date of May 15th? What did people need to provide by then?
By May 15th, they will need to provide a completed application and their proof of employment for April. So their pay stubs, the completed W-9, and their monthly schedule.
Okay, good to know.
Just one to clarify that the 15th of each month following month you're seeking the incentive, you wouldn't have to submit all that paperwork again, but you would just have to submit some of it to let us know you're still employed, you're still working with young children. And so yes, but May 15th is the first opportunity to apply for the April wage incentive.
And these grants are for profit and not for profit, is that correct?
Correct, and faith-based.
And faith-based, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Our next question is, are staff that are not working but still getting paid eligible to receive this incentive pay?
Staff that are not working are not eligible.
No. But their center could apply for the grants program if it's a licensed center.
Okay. Let's see, are we, Joanna, are we getting any questions live yet?
We have gotten a few. Do you want me to read some of them?
Yeah, and then I'll chime in. I think we only have about 3 pre-submitted questions left. So go ahead and let's do a live question.
Okay, we got a few questions about eligibility for tribal early education facilities. Are these eligible?
As long as they're licensed by the state of New Mexico, by the Children, Youth, and Families Department, then yes, they would be eligible.
Okay, and a few questions have come in as well around summer programs. How do those fit in? Are those eligible to receive any funding?
So if for this program, if it's a licensed, again, to the point, if it's a licensed facility in the state of New Mexico by the Children, Youth and Families Department, the business is eligible for this grant. So that's really the only criteria to be eligible for this funding.
Okay.
Now, some summer programs, places are not licensed, and so then they would not be eligible. But it really is, that's the foundational thing that makes you eligible.
So I have a question here. Boys and girls clubs, are those considered eligible in community centers?
Some boys and girls clubs are licensed by Children, Youth and Families, and they would then be eligible. But some of them are not, and then they would not be eligible. So if people hold a license from the Children, Youth and Families Department to provide childcare in the state of New Mexico, they are eligible for this grant.
Great, great. I've got one question here. If they've already been, if the company has already been awarded a PPP loan, are they eligible for this grant?
Yes.
Yes, they are. The application does ask if individuals have applied for any of the other supports, the PPP loan or the EIDL loan, but it's not, if you have, it does not mean that you cannot apply for and receive this grant.
Okay. Can Bernalillo, our next question, can Bernalillo County use these funds to assist in summer programs and after-school programs?
I don't know. Again, this grant program goes directly to businesses, licensed childcare businesses across the state.
Okay.
So if Bernalillo County has licensed childcare providers that are licensed by the state of New Mexico, they would be eligible to receive these funds when they submit an application.
Okay, great. Joanne, do we have any other live questions?
We had, I think about, let's see, here's one that is about the funds. Can the funds be used, oh, excuse me, can funds be used to purchase safer equipment?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, and then we did have a question that is beyond, I think, the grant program, but if you all want to address it, that is, where can the facilities go to pick up their protection equipment, the thermometers and things that you mentioned?
Yeah, I don't know if we're able to, or if Deputy Secretary Duran-Sali is able to unmute. She is our PPE guru.
Okay, and I don't think I see her on.
Okay.
I'll try.
But I know there'll be, there is a whole distribution network, thanks to so many of you on the phone here today and have been with us since the beginning, have connected with the department and with our partners at New Mexico Early Childhood Services and others to create a pretty awesome distribution network across the state to get masks, gloves, thermometers, cloth mask coverings for children to distribute across the state. So if you email at child.care@state.nm.us, whoever asked that question, we will make sure to get that answered for you. Again, that's child.care@state.nm.us. And we'll make sure to connect you with PPE.
Okay, wonderful. And I'll do one more question. Can administrative staff apply for the incentive?
Claire?
The priority is really for individual educators, teachers, teaching assistants, head teachers who are providing direct care to children.
But there is a link for administrators and directors, and then of course owners of family child care.
Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry, I misunderstood. I was, because we've had a question about other individuals who are providing really important supports like office staff and food workers, janitors, all of those folks. And I may have misunderstood the question. I'm sorry.
Okay, and I may have over. So I would say
But yes,
anyone
if
who has
you-
questions, if they're eligible, just to email us at that, either at Claire or Matt's contact information or child.care@state.nm.us. We will help you.
Wonderful. Joanna, did you have any other questions coming in live?
I think with time, that's it, and we'll get the rest of the questions to the ECECD team.
Okay, fantastic. Did we have any wrap-up slide, or Secretary Gerginski, did you want to say anything before we sign off?
No, I just again to thank you, Secretary Keys and Joanna, your team, for helping us be part of your webinar series and to really think about our childcare businesses across the state really as an important engine of our economic recovery. We know that there is a lot still for all of us to learn as we begin to think about reopening and what that means. I do want to reiterate, though, to everybody on this call, the health and safety guidance is back up on the NewMexicoKids.org. We are still operating under group sizes of 8 with 2 adults, so keeping it at that 10, really wanting to make sure that those group sizes remain the group composition is the same every day, that we're not moving children between groups, that staff aren't moving between groups day to day. We know that those are real challenges for all of you, but we need your help and your support in helping prevent further spread and allowing people to go to work, utilize childcare. We are in very strong discussions with the governor's office and other advocates thinking about, and nationally thinking about, what does the future hold for childcare as we begin to recognize these new requirements and these health and safety guidelines that we need to follow in order to protect our staff, our children, the people that we serve. So we, again, as I think Claire said at the beginning, please continue to email us, let us know your questions, and also give us your suggestions. We're really open to hearing from many of you who are doing incredibly innovative things and working with your community leaders. I think that's what we've seen through this public health emergency, is the connections to your local community businesses, your economic development offices, your emergency operations centers. The more we can strengthen our local communities, the better off our businesses are going to be, the better off our families and our children will be. So we know that we all have a long road to go here, but we're in this together, all together, New Mexico. And we have an incredible leader in Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's helping us pave the way forward and to do great things for our state and also for our families and children. With that, I will we'll close, and we'll know again. I think Joanna said the PowerPoint will be posted. This webinar has been recorded. We know you probably have lots of questions, but we want to encourage you to look at the slides around preparing for your application, really gathering that data, and we will keep you posted, as we always do, through our regular email communication about when exactly the link will be available, and again, available to help answer your questions and work our way through this new grant opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. Thank you, Joanna, for everything you're doing and for running this webinar. And we will see you all next week. Thanks so much.
Bye.